All right, guys, we're almost live in like 3, 2, 1. So I'll start as soon as we go live. Good morning and a warm welcome to this Facebook live stream with Ms. Sutapa Basu for our quarterly newsletter, the Billabong Bulletin. Within the pages of this publication, we have a dedicated section named Interlocution, wherein our editorial board interviews eminent personalities from diverse domains. Today, we have the privilege of interviewing a talented and accomplished author who has carved a niche for herself in the world of literature, Ms. Sutapa Basu. With a passion for storytelling, Sutapa has authored several books that have been widely acclaimed for their depth, sensitivity, and gripping narration. Her insights into complex human emotions, her ability to weave vividly detailed settings, and her unique way of bringing characters to life have earned her a dedicated following of readers. We are thrilled to have Sutapa join us today and look forward to hearing more about her literary journey. Now, I would like to request Sanjana Nair, our editor-in-chief, to take us through Ms. Sutapa's profile. Sanjana?
Thank you, Megha ma'am. We are honored to be joined by a best-selling, award-winning author, an educationist, acclaimed poet, translator, and writing coach. She is renowned for her prowess as a historical writer, and her novels have achieved praise and appreciation by readers across the world. I warmly welcome Ms. Sutapa Basu to this interview. We also have our editorial and communications coordinator, Ms. Megha Bhatt, as well as the editorial board members, Lavanya Kapoor, Prashasti Praveen, Paloma Jain, and Sanya Mirza Beg joining us today. To familiarize you with Ms. Sutapa's achievements, her historical novel, The Curse of Nadir Shah, won the Best Fiction Award by Author Awards 2020, instituted by JK Papers and the Times of India. She is the 2016 first prize winner of the Times of India's Right India campaign for Amish Tripathi, while her debut, a psychological thriller Dangle, was nominated for the Anupam Kher Award for Best Debut English Novel in 2017. She is well known for her best-selling historical fiction, Padmavati, The Queen Tells Her Own Story, published in 2017 by Readomania Publishers. Her historical works also include the popular novel The Legend of Genghis Khan, published in 2018. Her most recent work was released in 2022, a non-fiction titled The Birth of My Nation, Tracing India's Nationhood for Young Readers. It is a historical narrative of how India was built till the present day. Sutapa's writing has received acclaim in The Mint, The Telegraph, The Times of India, and more by innumerable reviewers and readers. Sutapa's short stories have appeared in several anthologies, and her poems have been published in News India, Kafiana, and more. For the last 22 years, Sutapa has been a managing editor as well as director publishing at publishing houses such as Oxford University Press, Encyclopedia Britannica, and many more. She has been frequently invited to speak at multitudinous literature festivals and conferences every year. Sutapa has a knack for teaching as well. She coaches children, young adults, and aspiring authors in creative writing skills at Sutapa's studio. She conducts training for school faculty as well as runs a live chat show, Bistro Bus Conversations with Sutapa Basu. She also hosts a blog and has a YouTube channel, making her one of the few rare authors that share their stories on social media. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking out the time to interact with us and answer our questions today.
Thank you so much, Sanjana, for all your kind words. And I would first and foremost thank the editorial board of Billabong School for having me here, for having me as an interview. It's an honor for me because I love speaking to young people. And I also would like to thank Megha Bhatt for making this possible for us. So let's chat.
Again, I would also like to thank Sanjana for the introduction. Now, let's hear Ms. Sutapa and talk all about her journey and the plans she has in mind. Our editorial board is very excited for today, Sutapa, and is ready with their questions. With your permission, we would like to start with those.
Please.
All right. Our first question will be posed by Paloma. Paloma, please go ahead.
Ma'am, can you tell us more about your journey as a writer and what made you what made you decide that you wanted to be an author and what was your inspiration?
So I have been reading a lot ever since, I could read actually. And I've been a voracious reader. And as I used to read, I used to always feel that what if I could write and my books would be read, the way I sort of would be greedily sort of, taking up all those books, reading everything. And that is when my dream started, that I would like to write. Of course, as I grew older, I would keep writing. I would write, stories, or I would write poems. And in fact, my mother says that, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, with my younger brother and with friends, we would play this game where we would put up plays, for our parents to see and so on. Now, somebody had to write those plays. So apparently, I used to write those plays on these old, school notebooks. And then once the play was over, those pages would just be floating in the air because I wouldn't need them. My mother had picked up those pages and she had kept them. And, it was also her dream. She felt maybe one day my daughter might write, become a writer. So that's what she tells me now. And as I grew older, I would write, but I never sort of thought of publishing. And you know what happens. First, it was my education, my higher education, then getting into a career, bringing up a family. So all those took precedence before my writing until it came to 2014. I was already working at Encyclopedia Britannica. I was, the director publishing there and setting up their publishing vertical for school. And I felt that if I did not, think about publishing now, I would probably never do it. So what I did is I left my job because it was not possible to write, and have a very, it was a very, very busy corporate job. So I decided to leave the job. And everyone told me that you're just crazy because you're leaving a very good cushy job just to write when you don't even know whether you will be able to write, whether anybody would publish what you're writing, and so on. So that is how I started off thinking about publishing with a lot of doubts in my mind. And then as I was writing my first book, the Write India campaign, which was conducted by the Times of India, came along. And like so many other writers, I think nearly 8,000 writers across the country, I submitted my story as well, my short story as well, with absolutely no hopes. When it was announced that it had won the first prize, I simply did not believe them. I just told my friends, no, it must be some other Sutapa who's won, not me. But when Times of India got in touch with me, I realized that I had won it. And that was a great boost to my morale. I would say Times of India gave me the platform to launch my writing career. So then my first book, I finished writing my first book, which is actually a psychological thriller called Dangle. And there was publisher, renomina publishers who agreed to publish the book. And that's how my career in writing started. And from then on, like, I have only been writing because I enjoy writing. I love writing. So I have been consistently writing since then.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing the glimpse in your journey.
Right. Thank you, Sutapa, for this lovely answer and talking about Dangle as well. Our next question will be posed by our editor-in-chief, Sanjana Nair. Sanjana, please go ahead with your question.
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to know what your writing process looks like. If you follow a routine or a specific ritual to get into the creative mindset, and how do you tackle writer's block as an author?
Okay, let's start with the writing process. I have not really consciously made a kind of process, but yes, one thing I do is every day in the morning, I sit down at my desk and I write. Whatever I may write, it could be a blog, it could be an article, it could be something that I'm already writing, a manuscript that I'm already writing, or sometimes, the manuscript has come back from an editor and I need to proofread it. So I am always connected to writing, number one. So maybe, I don't know whether you would call that a process. Now, when I start writing, a lot of my writing needs a lot of research. So when I've decided the theme and the topic, I spend at least 2 to 3 months on just researching, which means I will read books connected to that theme or topic. I will access documentaries, films, if there are any, and I would see those, make my notes on those. I would go to blogs, I would go to libraries, read up references connected to my theme, make a lot of notes. So at least 2 to 3 months goes in preparing for that particular theme or topic of the book. And then I start writing. So usually over those 3 or 4 months, as I'm doing my research, I have already created my story. So I know what's the beginning of the story, and I know what is how I would like to end it. It's a middle part which needs to be done. So I start writing, and I usually make a kind of a structure, which means I sort of summarize each chapter and I write it down. So I have all these chapter structures which I already make, and then I start actually expanding those chapters. Now, what happens is, while I'm writing those chapters, there will be times when I might just go off track. I might suddenly a twist or a turn in the story can occur to me, and I will change the structure. So that's perfectly fine. I mean, I don't have to stick to the structure that I have initially made. And another thing which many people possibly think that I'm exaggerating, when I'm writing a story, that story is all the time revolving in my head. Whether I'm sitting at my desk, or I'm sleeping, or I'm watching the TV. So that story is always there in my mind. So after a while, I think the characters of the story take over my mind. I'm no longer writing the story, they are writing their story. So the conversations that they would have, the dialogues they would have, they keep coming back consistently. And there are times I've woken up in the night, I come back to my desk and I sit down and quickly write down what has occurred, because I will forget it by the time it's morning. So I would say that I live with my story while it is in the process of getting written. So that is basically my process, and it's not something I have been taught, or not something I have picked up from books or anything like that. It is something that has happened very naturally with me. And I continue to do that because I feel that works for me. So what I believe is that there is no set writing process for any individual writer. I think that people create their own process, and they will always have a process that suits them the best. Like the time possibly that you would want to write. So everybody has a different time when they feel they're more creative. They feel that they have an empty mind space, which is very important for writing. So there will be writers who would write early in the morning, or there would be writers who write late at night. There would be writers who are writing during the daytime. So I think the process of writing is very individual, and one must sort of go into your own inner self to find out which is the process that suits you. So that is that's about the process. One thing I do is that I don't change my place of writing, and my files are all very organized. So when I sit down to write, I can immediately start writing wherever I had left off the earlier day. It's not that I have to search for my files, I have to organize my files. And also I usually have the same place, because I don't want to be distracted by other things while I'm writing. I would totally focus and concentrate on my writing. Writer's block, sorry, but I really believe that's an excuse for writers not to write, because I don't think there's anything like a writer's block. It is true that there will be days when you will be able to write prolifically, the words will just keep coming, and sometimes keying them in doesn't keep up with the speed of the thoughts. But there will be times when one will be struggling to, okay, how do I write this? And you will, whatever you've written, you will delete it and you will rewrite it. So there'll be a lot of rewriting, and at the end of the day, you will feel, I haven't really written so much as I had written yesterday. But I never give up the writing. I still try to write. And if there is a time when I just don't feel like writing, I read. I do a lot of reading, because I believe that when you're reading as a writer, that is absolutely essential. So when you read, and you are already maybe in the middle of a manuscript and you're writing and you're reading another writer's book, you will suddenly come across a style, a certain phrase, a certain way of putting things, which will tell you that, oh, wow, what a very beautiful way of writing the same thing. Something like as simple as a sunset, you want to describe it. And I have found such wonderful descriptions of sunset, such unusual and unique descriptions, which will always stay in my mind. And as a writer, I would like that whatever I write in my book remains with my readers even after they have read the book. So that is the reason I read a lot of writers' works, because so much of it then remains with me and helps me to find my own voice when I'm writing.
Right. Thank you so much for the insightful answer. I think a lot of our viewers that write will relate to your words very much. Thank you.
Really. Thank you so much, Sutapa, for that answer. Our next question will be posed by Sanya. Sanya, please go ahead.
Ma'am, one of your notable works is Padmavat, the queen tells her own story. What challenges did you face while reimagining this historical character? And how did you balance historical accuracy with your own creative interpretation?
Sanya, first thing I wanted to tell you is that the title of my story, let me show you the book, is Padmavati. The film is called Padmavat, but this is Padmavati. So, yes, the challenges I faced. Now, when I started doing my research on Padmavati, I was amazed to know a few facts. One of them was that she was probably just about 15 or 16 years old when she committed Johar. So the first thing that came to me is that such a young girl and such determination, where did it come from? So that was the time I realized that Padmavati was not just a queen or just a beautiful girl. There was something else in her. There was a lot of substance in her, a lot of willpower, a lot of determination, which helped her to find her niche in history. So my first search was to look for that girl. So I did a lot of research, read a lot of books about Padmavati. And what I did was I went to Chittorgarh and I listened to so many stories, so many legends about Padmavati, because there was a lot of talk. The movie Padmavat was actually released 2 weeks after my book was launched. But there was already a lot of talk about whether there was, any Padmavati at all. Did she exist? So when I went to Chittorgarh, that was what I was also my, my query, what I was seeking is whether there was actually a person like her. But when I heard all the stories, all the legends, I saw her palace, which is, it is built in the middle of the lake. I saw the fort, the Chittorgarh fort, went all around it. I realized that she has to exist. There was definitely somebody called Padmavati. And the story is so strong in that region that you cannot, what I mean is that if there is smoke, there has to be fire, right? So that was my proof that definitely there was a woman called Padmavati, and she was this woman who could take her own decisions, who was, though she was very young and she was very beautiful, but at the same time, she was a very smart, a person with a lot of gumption, a person who knew how to navigate through all the misogyny, all the patriarchy that was very prevalent in the 13th century when the story has been written. So that was my challenge. My challenge was to find out firstly whether she actually existed, and then all the stories about her, how much of it was reality and how much of it was probably imagination. The other thing that you just asked that question. I have written about 3 historical books, and there is already one more in the pipeline. One thing that I am very careful about is I do not mess with the history. So in all my books, the historical facts are exactly how they are. And I do not study one book or one opinion. I study a lot of books and then I pick out what is common out of them. So I am very, very clear that I will not in any way present biased facts. While that is important, I keep my facts absolutely intact. I do not in any way distort them. If you know how history is written, history is based on evidence, okay? On evidence that can be proved. Now, you know very well that whether it's Padmavati or it is Genghis Khan, none of the people who lived in that era are there to tell us their story. So we have to depend upon what historians have written, different historians have written. Now, when you put all the entire history of that region or that person's life in a pattern, in a linear pattern with links, you will find that there will be links missing. Why do you think those links are missing? Because there's no evidence for those links, right? Which means there are gaps. I use those gaps. I use those gaps to weave my story through the historical facts. So there have been readers who've come back to me for, a book like The Legend of Genghis Khan, and they've come back and said, did that really happen to Genghis Khan? Because my story is so well woven through the facts that they have been unable to distinguish between what is the fact and which is the tale. But that's what my aim is always. So I never distort facts. So I never mess with the accuracy of the region, the story, or the person's life, or whatever I'm writing about.
Thank you so much for your insightful answer, ma'am. I'm extremely tempted to read your books now.
Please do.
Thank you, Sutapa, for that lovely answer. Our next question is by Prashasti. Prashasti, please go ahead with your question.
Ma'am, my question for you is, many of your novels are set in historical or mythological contexts. What draws you to these themes, and why did you decide to have these characters be the subject of your novels?
So first and foremost, when I started writing, I myself, I have two genres, which are my favorite genres as a reader. One of them is historical novels, and the other one are thrillers. So I felt that it's best to start off with something that I know very well, in the sense that I have read enough historical fiction or historical novels, historical nonfiction, to be able to write, and by very well-known established authors. So I felt that I will be able to write a historical novel, and therefore I was drawn to history. The other thing is that I'm very fond of stories, and history is like endless stories for you to gauge. One more fact is that history is something that will always help us to understand what is happening today. The past always casts a shadow on the present. So that is the reason when I wrote this book, The Birth of My Nation, my whole aim or purpose was that the children of today must know how this nation that we talk about so much, and which has, there is so much happening in our nation today. Why is that happening? Let's look at the Kashmir question. So why is there so much trouble in Kashmir? Only when you know the history of Kashmir will you get to know why the problems are there. And that is the reason why I believe history is something that everybody should study. Only when you study history, it doesn't matter which subject you are, is your favorite. It could be science, it could be maths. But if you know the history of that subject, or if you know the people who have created the content for that subject, you will always get to understand your subject much better. Because history brings alive for us all those people who we believe have lived in the past and whose lives don't matter to us anymore. But that's not true. Their lives matter a lot. If you're a person who loves maths and you read about C.V. Raman and how he went through his entire life and then made the discoveries, you will understand, you'll never forget that what he did. So similarly, that's why I believe that history is something which should become a favorite of every young person today. Let's talk about why the regions of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu are fighting over the Kaveri river waters. If you know the history of that region, you will get to know why. So every time we need to go back to history. The other thing I discovered about history, especially, you asked why did I go to these people, these particular historical figures and write about them. Because, when we read about these people in our history books, for us, they are not living human beings. They are people who have done something great, and that's why their names are there in the history books. But how did they do it? We need to know that. So when I wrote about Genghis Khan spent most of his childhood and boyhood in the steppes, living in a hut made of branches and leaves. He hardly had anything to eat. He and his family had hardly anything to eat. And that is how he grew up. The only thing that inspired him was a dream that he had, that his mother had actually. Because when he was born, it was predicted that he would bring all the Mongolian tribes together and create a huge empire. With that dream in mind, his mother managed to survive on the steppes with her family, and Genghis Khan was one of them, and all the time tell him that you are going to lead your people. So you have to be brave, you have to suffer. He really suffered during his childhood. And she told him all this suffering is going to only make you stronger. So what my aim is when I write these historical stories is to make people realize that these were living human beings who had to overcome a lot of obstacles. They had to be very determined. And that is why they have achieved what they have. If you look at Nadir Shah, a lot of people tell me, why did you write about Nadir Shah? He was so cruel. Why was Nadir Shah is something that we need to know. He was born as a poor shepherd's boy in a very remote area of what we know today as Iran, Persia. How did he become the Shah of Persia is something that we need to know. How did he climb to that place where he could get throne of Persia? Why did he invade India? It's important for us to know why he invaded India. It was not because he wanted to murder or kill. There was a reason why he did it. And history is always a story of cause and effect. Why did something happen? And what was the reason behind it? So we need to always know the reasons. And then we will get to know that people whom we may think that, they are cruel and they should never be talked about, they should be kept, away from us, are people who had reasons for what they did. For example, let's take Genghis Khan. He had this army and he actually invaded a lot of Central Asia and nearly reached Venice. So his empire was at one time, when the Mongolian Empire was at its zenith, it was 1/5 of the world's land. So why did he have this army and why did he have to invade? Now, you see, in those days, the army was not paid in any salaries. The soldiers were not paid salaries. They were only paid in the loot that they could get when they went to war. So if he did not take his army to war, he would not have anything to give them and they would slowly go back to their homes. He would not have an army at all. So there are many that we can only get to know when we research and when we dig deep into the history of that region, that person, or that place. So that is why history becomes very important to us. And that's what attracted me basically to all these figures and to writing historical books.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your valuable knowledge with us.
Ma'am, my question for you is that can you share any details about your current or upcoming projects, and what can the readers expect from your future works?
So, Lavanya, one thing I discovered in myself as a writer is that um, while I have already written historical novels, I have also written children's literature, and I have written a lot of thrillers. I love writing in different genres. So I am going to try my hand as many genres as possible. So last year I wrote a nonfiction, and I'm going to continue to write in different genres, because the reason for that is every genre has its own parameters, its own restrictions. And when I try to structure my writing according to those parameters, those restrictions, I have to make an effort. And that effort will actually improve my writing. So I will be able to improve my craft. So that has always been a kind of incentive for me, that I need to become a better writer, a much better writer, maybe as good a writer as those, those writers and the novelists that I used to read when I was a child, and I still read. So I would like to become as better as possible. And that's the reason, one of the things that I plan to do is to write in as many genres as possible. While I will continue to write historical novels, I will continue to write short stories. I have also 2 anthologies of short stories, which are on Kindle, because when they were published, the COVID was going on, and publishing was not happening. Print publishing was not happening. So they are both on Kindle. They are called Out of the Blue, and they're called The Anatomy of Affection. Both of them are a collection of short stories. So I continue to write short stories, children's fiction, children's literature, children's nonfiction, thrillers, as well as historical books. So I think in the year or in the months to come, you can expect one or the other of these books to come across.
Thank you, ma'am, for your answer. We would love to see you in versatile fields of writing.
Thank you.
And
so-
Papa, that was like really amazing. Sanjana, please go ahead.
Yeah, and so with that, unfortunately, we end today's engaging and informative interview. Ma'am, it was a delight to listen to your stories and all your advice. I would like to sincerely thank you for lending us your time for this session today. I'm sure the viewers watching have found it as enjoyable and fruitful as we have.
Thank you so much, Sanjana, and thank you so much, the editorial board of Billabong, and thank you, Megha Bhatt. It was a very rejuvenating session for me. I love talking to young people, and I think all of you have posed such beautiful questions. All of you were very articulate and very to the point, the questions were. I hope I was able to satisfy your curiosity and your need for information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sutapa, for spending this day with us. I feel so honored for being a part of this interview, listening to all the questions and some enlightening answers as well. Before we wrap up this session, I would like all the members to look quickly at the camera so we can freeze this moment. And of course, you all can smile.